Number 8. Heather Barbera. In a tragic incident on July 7, 2018, a woman from New Jersey committed a heinous act, taking the lives of her own mother and grandmother. Heather Barbera, who was 42 years old at the time, used a nightstick to brutally bludgeon the two women inside their shared apartment in Ventnor City. After carrying out the unspeakable act, she fled to Atlantic City, taking the victims' credit cards and cash with her. Barbera had moved in with her unemployed mother, 67-year-old Michelle Gordon, and her 87-year-old grandmother Elaine Rosen, sometime in 2018. It remains unclear whether her two children were residing with her during the time of the murders. It's believed that the tragic events unfolded during a heated argument, possibly related to Barbera's struggles with addiction. The gruesome discovery of the victims' bodies was made the following day by Richard Rosen, Barbera's uncle. In a statement given to the Philadelphia Inquirer, he described the horrifying scene that confronted him, with the lifeless bodies lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Richard desperately hoped for a miracle, wishing that the woman was still alive and their lives could be spared. However, deep down he knew that it was already too late. Richard's suspicions immediately fell upon Barbera as the likely perpetrator of the crime. Wasting no time, he promptly notified the police of his concerns. During the investigation, Richard disclosed that Barbera struggled with emotional issues and suspected she was addicted to prescription drugs. While Richard's plea for justice unfolded, Barbera remained on the run. Initially seeking refuge in Atlantic City, she eventually ended up in Manhattan, where law enforcement apprehended her on July 11th at Salisbury Hotel. The traces of her journey were apparent, as she had funded her escape and stayed at the hotel using her mother's credit card. Along the way, she made additional purchases, leaving behind a virtual breadcrumb trail that led the authorities straight to her location. Barbera was apprehended while sitting on the steps near the Port Authority bus terminal. Eventually, Barbera confessed to the crime. However, her day in court did not come until October 2020. During the trial, she pleaded guilty to charges of first-degree murder and first-degree aggravated manslaughter. Consequently, she was handed a 42-year prison sentence. Richard Rosen expressed disappointment at what he perceived as leniency, asserting that Barbera should have received a life sentence for the murder of two innocent women. Number 7. Liam McAtasney. In 2016, an unsettling confession was captured on video by a filmmaker who suspected his friend of committing murder. The chilling event unfolded when a 19-year-old artist named Sarah Stern mysteriously vanished in December. Her abandoned car was discovered on a bridge in Belmar, New Jersey, raising alarm bells. As the nation became captivated by Sarah's disappearance, Anthony Edward Curry, a filmmaker who had begun working on a movie a couple of months earlier, found himself pondering his childhood friend Liam McAtasney. Curry recalled that McAtasney, who had been close to Sarah during high school, had shared a film concept with him that eerily mirrored the circumstances surrounding Sarah's vanishing. McAtasney had described a plot involving the murder of a young woman, prompting Curry to question whether his friend's imagination had been inspired by a disturbing reality. Driven by his concerns, Curry went to the authorities, who joined forces with him to orchestrate a covert operation. While the exact details of Curry's successful effort to extract a confession remain undisclosed, the result was indisputable. The entire confession was captured on video. In the recording, McAtasney admitted to strangling Sarah before enlisting the help of his former roommate, Preston Taylor, to dispose of her body by tossing it off a bridge in New Jersey. During McAtasney's trial, prosecutors presented compelling evidence supporting their argument that he had murdered Sarah with the intent of seizing thousands of dollars that had once belonged to her mother, who tragically passed away from cancer in 2013. They revealed that McAtasney had meticulously planned the crime for 6 months, intending to steal the substantial sum of money held in Sarah's lockbox. As a result, he faced multiple charges, including conspiracy, evidence tampering, desecration of human remains, and first-degree murder. In February 2019, Monmouth County jury found Liam McAtasney guilty. Despite his lack of prior criminal history, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with an additional 10 years added to his sentence. Number 6. Scott KOLOGI. In a harrowing incident on New Year's Eve in 2017, a chilling act of violence unfolded as a young man from New Jersey ruthlessly took the lives of 4 members of his own family. Scott KOLOGI, at the age of 16, committed an unimaginable massacre using a semi-automatic rifle. Shortly before the stroke of midnight on December 31st, he unleashed a hail of gunfire, tragically killing his sister, father, mother, and his grandfather's girlfriend, who he regarded as his grandmother. The victims were 44-year-old Linda KOLOGI, 42-year-old Stephen KOLOGI, 18-year-old Brittany KOLOGI, and 70-year-old Mary Schultz. The horrific incident took place within the family's residence in Long Beach, with Scott firing the weapon 14 times, extinguishing the lives of his loved ones. During Scott's trial, Supreme Court Judge Mark Lemieux expressed the immeasurable harm caused by his actions. The night of the tragedy unfolded when Scott lured his mother to his darkened room and mercilessly shot her, setting off a chain of murders. His father, upon hearing the commotion, rushed to investigate, only to meet the same fate. Scott proceeded to casually take the lives of his sister, who had returned home after completing her first semester of college, and then Mary. Fortunately, Scott's brother and grandfather, who were present in the house during the rampage, managed to escape unscathed. Nonetheless, Monmouth County Assistant Prosecutor Sean Brennan emphasized the enduring psychological scars they would bear from the tragic events that unfolded that day. During the trial, Scott's defense attorney Richard Lemuro argued that his client was afflicted by mental illness. Lemuro requested a sentence of 30 years in prison. However, Scott was ultimately found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder, along with additional charges. As a result, he received a sentence of 150 years in prison, ensuring that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 5. Sean LANNON. In 2021, a disturbing series of crimes unfolded, with a 42-year-old man from Woodbury, New Jersey, facing accusations of multiple murders in 2 different states. The suspect, Sean LANNON, was apprehended in St. Louis, Missouri on March 10, 2021 by the U.S. Marshals St. Louis Metro Fugitive Task Force. Just 5 days prior to his arrest, a chilling discovery was made at the Albuquerque International Sunport Airport. 4 decomposing bodies were found inside plastic bins inside a vehicle. Tragically, one of the victims was identified as Jennifer LANNON, Sean's ex-wife. The other victims found in the parking garage were 40-year-old Justin Matter, 21-year-old Matthew Miller, and 60-year-old Randall Apostolin. Reports indicated that the 2 individuals from New Mexico were friends with Jennifer, while one individual apparently assisted Sean in moving the bins without knowledge of their gruesome contents, according to the Associated Press. Following his arrest, Sean confessed to the murders of all 4 victims and claimed responsibility for the deaths of an additional 11 individuals. One of Sean's other victims, Michael Dabakowski, was discovered on March 8th in East Greenwich, New Jersey, just days before the bodies were found at the Albuquerque airport. On that same day, Sean was spotted at a bus station in Camden, approximately 18 miles away from East Greenwich. 66-year-old Michael was identified as Sean's former mentor during their involvement with a youth program in the 1980s. Prosecutors allege that Sean broke into Michael's home and fatally bludgeoned him with a hammer. Sean claimed that he had been sexually assaulted by Michael as a child, though these allegations were never substantiated. Sean was arrested while driving Michael's stolen car in St. Louis, implying his possible involvement in the victim's death. On December 21st, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of first-degree murder and was subsequently sentenced to 35 years in prison. He still faces charges for the murders of the 4 other victims in New Mexico, pending a future trial. Have you ever witnessed a crime and reported it to the police? Share your story in the comments below, and while you're at it, subscribe to join the Badger fam. Number 4. Antonia ASHFORD. In 2021, a shocking incident unfolded in Jackson Township, New Jersey, involving a female warden at a federal jail in New York City who was accused of murdering her husband, Roderick ASHFORD. The suspect, 44-year-old Antonia ASHFORD, allegedly shot and killed her 47-year-old husband, who held the position of an associate warden at the Sunset Park Detention Facility in New York City. Roderick was also employed by the Bureau of Prisons and worked as a drug treatment specialist at FCI Fort Dix in southern New Jersey. The authorities were alerted to the crime around 2:15 a.m., prompting their swift response to the couple's residence. Upon arrival, officers discovered Roderick lying unresponsive on the floor, having suffered a gunshot wound to his face. Despite efforts to save him, he tragically succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. Antonia was subsequently arrested and held at the Ocean County Jail pending her detention hearing. According to the couple's neighbor Sandy Troiano, they had only lived on the street for a short period. Sandy expressed disbelief that such a tragedy could occur, especially close to home. During a post-arrest interview, Antonia confessed to killing her husband. Their son informed detectives that his parents frequently engaged in arguments, often resorting to pointing guns at each other. However, on this fateful occasion, Antonia followed through and fatally shot Roderick. Although their son did not witness the shooting directly, he reported hearing the gunshot while playing video games in his room. Antonia now faces charges of possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose and murder. However, the ultimate outcome of the case remains unclear. Number 3. Daniel Smith. In 2021, a tragic incident unfolded involving a transgender woman who was a vocal advocate of the LGBTQ community. Sadly, 23-year-old Shaquille Lofton, known online as Shai Vanderpump, was shot in the face by 36-year-old Daniel Smith from New Jersey. Smith has been charged with multiple weapons offenses and 1 count of murder in relation to the death of Shaquille. The incident occurred at approximately 4:30 a.m. on June 30th at a residence on Kelsey Avenue in Trenton, the capital city of New Jersey. Authorities swiftly responded to the scene following reports of a shooting and discovered Shaquille with a gunshot wound to the face. She was rushed to Capitol Health Regional Medical Center, but tragically was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The prosecutor's press release indicated that the case is being investigated for potential bias charges, given that Shaquille was transgender and identified as female. Law enforcement executed a search warrant at the victim's residence, and based on witness testimonies and surveillance footage, Daniel Smith was identified as the perpetrator. A motion has been filed to detain Smith pending his trial. However, it appears that he has not yet been apprehended. Detectives from Mercer County have sought the assistance of the public, urging anyone with information that could lead to Smith's arrest to come forward and aid in the ongoing investigation. Regrettably, he remains at large at the present time. Number 2. CAVERLY family tragedy. Tragedy struck in May 2020 when a teenager lost his life due to a devastating sandhole collapse on a beach in New Jersey. The CAVERLY family was enjoying a sunny day by the shore when an unexpected turn of events shattered their tranquility. Todd and Angela CAVERLY, the parents, were observing their 17-year-old daughter and 18-year-old son Levi as they enthusiastically dug a deep pit in the sand. Unfortunately, a freak accident unfolded, claiming Levi's life. Recent storms had affected the area, leaving the sand damp and compact. A witness who was present at the beach described how the teens were digging the pit so deeply that they could eventually disappear from sight. The witness inadvertently captured a photograph of the family while taking a picture of her husband at around 12:50 p.m. Hours later, tragedy struck as the sand collapsed, burying Levi and his sister. The sandhole entombed Levi, while his sister was buried up to her neck, fighting for survival. By 3:45 p.m., emergency responders, including helicopters and fire engines, flooded the beach in a race against time. Todd and Angela helplessly watched as the first responders tirelessly attempted to extricate Levi from the pit, which reportedly reached a depth of 10 feet. Tragically, by the time they reached him, Levi had already passed away. The CAVERLY family, hailing from Maine, had been on vacation when the unthinkable occurred. The arduous rescue effort lasted over 2.5 hours, during which Levi's sister was successfully freed from the sand. Although she survived, she required immediate medical attention for her injuries at the scene. Number 1. NILE DIAKOS. In March 2020, a tragic incident occurred in Leonia, New Jersey, where a woman was fatally stabbed at her residence. Initially, Andre Daniels, the father of the victim's daughter, was considered the prime suspect in the killing of 35-year-old Alicia Arnaud. The couple had been in an on and off relationship for 14 years, and reports indicated a history of assault by Daniels, as shared by the victim's family. However, Daniels fled the scene shortly after the crime. He was swiftly apprehended, but further investigation led to a shocking revelation. Unknown's lifeless body was discovered by her 13-year-old daughter, who heard her mother's screams. The horrific scene unfolded at the top of the staircase in their Grand Avenue home, with Unknown lying in a pool of her own blood. When law enforcement arrived, they found the young girl and Unknown's new partner, 35-year-old NILE DIAKOS, who had made the distress call to 911. DIAKOS informed the authorities about the past restraining orders against Daniels due to his abusive behavior and expressed his disbelief that Daniels was responsible for Unknown's death. However, a chilling twist emerged when evidence indicated that it was DIAKOS who had stabbed Unknown, not Daniels. Investigators believe that DIAKOS murdered Unknown and then left the house before returning to report the crime. Consequently, charges against Daniels were dropped and he was released from police custody. Phone recordings surfaced, capturing DIAKOS confessing to the stabbing. Subsequently, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In 2023, he faced trial and was convicted of the crime. While the maximum sentence he could have received was life in prison, he opted to accept a plea agreement that offered a reduced sentence of 30 years. Which one of these stories makes you never want to visit New Jersey? Let us know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Bad Badger.